Minions! Today I'm going to be continuing reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, chapters 6 through 8. Sorry it's been so long, but my computer won't update, so I'm just going to redo it. So, let's see. Chapter 6. Hold on, find it. Okay. The journey from platform 9 3/4. Harry's last month with the Dursleys wasn't fun. True, Dudley was now so scared of Harry he wouldn't stay in the same room, while Aunt Petunia and Uncle Dursley and Uncle Vernon didn't shut Harry in his cupboard, force him to do anything, or shout at him. In fact, they didn't speak to him at all. Half terrified, half furious, they acted as though any chair with Harry in it were empty. Although this was an improvement in many ways, it did become a bit depressing after a while. Harry kept to his room. With his new owl for company, he had decided to call her Hedwig, a name he had found in a history of magic. His school books were very interesting. He lay on his bed, reading late into the night, Hedwig swooping in and out of the open window as she pleased. It was lucky that Aunt Petunia didn't come in to vacuum anymore, because Hedwig kept bringing back dead mice. Ugh. Every night, before he went to sleep, Harry ticked off another day on the piece of paper he had pinned to the wall, counting down to September the 1st. On the last day of August, he thought he'd better speak to his aunt and uncle about getting to King's Cross Station the next day. So he went down to the living room where they were watching a quiz show on television. He cleared his throat to let them know he was there, and Dudley screamed and ran from the room. Uncle Vernon? Uncle Vernon grunted to show he was listening. I need to be at King's Cross tomorrow to go to Hogwarts. Uncle Vernon grunted again. Would it be alright if you gave me a lift? Grunt. Harry suppose that meant yes. Thank you. He was about to go back upstairs when Uncle Vernon actually spoke. Funny way to a wizard school. The train, magic carpets, all got punctures, have they? Do you have to be such a jerk to him? Come on. Harry didn't say anything. Where is this school anyway? I don't know, said Harry, realizing this for the first time. He pulled the ticket Hagrid had given him out of his pocket. I just take the train from platform 9 3/4 at 11 o'clock, he read. His aunt and uncle stared. Platform what? 9 3/4. Don't talk rubbish, said Uncle Vernon. There is no platform 9 3/4. It's on my ticket. Barking, said Uncle Vernon. Howling mad, the lot of them. You'll see. You just wait. All right. We'll take you to King's Cross. We're going to London tomorrow anyway. Or I wouldn't bother. Why are you going to London? Harry asked, trying to keep things friendly. Taking Dudley to the hospital, growled Uncle Vernon. Got to have that ruddy tail removed before he goes to Smellington's. No offense, but he kind of got what he deserved. Harry woke up at 5 o'clock the next morning and was too excited and nervous to go back to sleep. He got up and pulled on his jeans because he didn't want to walk into the station in his wizard's robes. He'd change on the train. He checked his Hogwarts list yet again to make sure he had everything he needed, saw that Hedwig was shut safely in her cage, and then paced the room, waiting for the Dursleys to get up. 2 hours later, Harry's huge, heavy trunk had been loaded into the Dudley's car, and Petunia had talked Dudley into sitting next to Harry, and they had set off. They reached King's Cross at 10:30. Uncle Vernon dumped Harry's trunk onto a cart, wheeled it into the station for him. Harry thought this was strangely kind until Uncle Vernon stopped dead, facing the platforms with a nasty grin on his face. Well, there you are, boy. Platform 9, platform 10. Your platform should be somewhere in the middle. but they don't seem to have felt it yet, do they? He was quite right, of course. There was a big plastic number 9 over one platform, and a plastic number 10 over the next one to it. And in the middle, nothing at all. Have a good term, said Uncle Vernon, with an even nastier smile. He left without another word. Harry turned and saw the Dursleys drive away. All three of them were laughing. Harry's mouth went rather dry. What on earth was he going to do? He was starting to attract a lot of funny looks because of Hedwig. He'd have to ask someone. He stopped a passing guard, but didn't dare mention platform 9 3/4. The guard had never heard of Hogwarts. When Harry didn't even tell him what part of the country it was in, he started to get annoyed, as though Harry was being stupid on purpose. Getting desperate, Harry asked for the train that left at 11 o'clock, but the guard said there wasn't one. In the end, the guard strode away, muttering about time wasters. Harry was now trying hard not to panic. According to the large clock over the arrivals board, he had 10 minutes left to get on to the train to Hogwarts. He had no idea how to do it. He was stranded in the middle of a station with a trunk he could hardly lift, a pocket full of wizard's money, and a large owl. Hagrid must have forgotten to tell him something you had to do, like tapping the third brick on the left to go into Diagon Alley. He wondered if he should get out his wand and start tapping the ticket inspector said between platforms 9 and 10. At the moment, a group of people passed just behind him and caught a few words of what they were saying. Packed with muggles, of course. Harry swung around. The speaker was a plump woman who was talking to 4 boys with all flaming red hair. Each of them was pushing a trunk like Harry's in front of them, and they had an owl. Heart hammering, Harry pushed his cart after them. They stopped, and so did he, just near enough to hear what they were saying. Now what's the platform number? Said the boy's mother. 9 3/4, piped a small girl, also red-headed, who was holding her hand. Mom, can't I go? You're not old enough, Jenny. Now be quiet. All right, Percy, you go first. What looked like the oldest boy marched towards platform 9 and 10. Harry watched carefully not to blink in case he missed it. Just as the boy reached the dividing barrier between the 2 platforms, a large crowd of tourists came swarming in front of him. By the time the last backpack had cleared away, the boy had vanished. Fred, you next, said the plump woman again. I'm not Fred, I'm George, said the boy. Honestly, woman, you call yourself our mother. Can't you tell I'm George? Sorry, George, dear. Only joking, I am Fred, said the boy, and he went off. His twin called after him to hurry up, and he must have done so, because a second later he had gone. But how had he done it? Now the third brother was walking briskly towards the barrier. He was almost there, and then, quite suddenly, he wasn't anywhere. There was nothing else for it. Excuse me, Harry said to the plump woman. Hello, dear, she said. First time at Hogwarts. Ron's new, too. She pointed at the last and youngest of her sons. He was tall, thin, and gangly, with freckles, big hands and feet, and a long nose. Yes, said Harry. The thing is, I don't know how to get onto the platform, she said kindly. And Harry nodded. Not to worry, she said. All you have to do is walk straight at the barrier between platforms 9 and 10. Don't stop, and don't be scared. You'll crash into it. That's very important. But best do it at a bit of a run if you're nervous. Go on now, before Ron. Okay, said Harry. He pushed his trolley around and stared at the barrier. It looked very solid. He started to walk towards it. People jostled him on their way to platforms 9 and 10. Harry walked more quickly. He was going to smash right into the barrier, and then he'd be in trouble. Leaning forward on his cart, he broke into a heavy run. The barrier was coming nearer and nearer. he wouldn't be able to stop. The cart was out of control. He was a foot away. He closed his eyes, ready for the crash. It didn't come. He kept running on. He opened his eyes. A scarlet steam engine was waiting next to a platform packed with people. A sign overhead said Hogwarts Express. Hogwarts Express, 11 o'clock. Harry looked behind him and saw a wrought iron archway where the barrier had been, with the words Platforms 9 and 3/4 on it. He had done it. Yay! Smoke from the engine drifted over the heads of the chattering crowd, while cats of every color wound here and there between their legs. Owls hooted to one another in a disgruntled sort of way over the babble and the scraping of heavy trunks. The first few carriages were already packed with students, some hanging out of the window to talk to their families, some fighting over seats. Harry pushed his cart off down the platform in search of an empty seat. He passed a round-faced boy who was saying, "Gran, I've lost my toad again." "Oh, Neville," he heard the old woman sigh. A boy with dreadlocks was surrounded by a small crowd. "Give us a look, Lee. Go on." The boy lifted the lid off a box in his arms, and the people around him shrieked and yelled as something inside poked out a long, hairy leg. Ugh, it was a spider. Those things are creepy. Harry pressed on through the crowd until he found an empty compartment near the end of the train. He put Hagrid inside first, then started to shove and heave his trunk towards the train door. He tried to lift it up the steps, but could hardly raise one end, and twice he dropped it painfully on his foot. Want a hand? It was one of the red-headed twins he'd followed through the barrier. "Yes, please." Harry panted. "Oi, Fred, come here and help." With the twins' help, Harry's trunk was at last tucked away in a corner of the compartment. "Thanks," said Harry, pushing his sweaty hair out of his eyes. "What's that?" said one of the twins suddenly, pointing at Harry's lightning scar. "Blimey," said the other twin. "Are you?" "He is," said the first twin. "Aren't you?" he added to Harry. "What?" said Harry. "Harry Potter," chorused the twins. "Oh, him," said Harry. Yes, I am." The two boys gawked at him, and Harry felt himself turning red. Then, to his relief, a voice came floating in through the train's open door. "Fred, George, are you there?" "Coming, Mom." With a last look at Harry, the twins hopped off the train. He sat down next to the window where, half hidden, he could watch the red-headed family on the platform and hear what they were saying. Their mother had just taken out her handkerchief. "Ron, you've got something on your nose." The youngest boy tried to jerk out of the way, but she grabbed him and began rubbing the end of his nose. "Mom, get off!" He wriggled free. Aw, has Ickle Ronnie got something on his nose? On his nosy, said one of the twins. "Shut up," said Ron. "Where's Percy?" said their mother. "He's coming now." The oldest boy came strutting into sight. He had already changed into his billowing black Hogwarts robes, and Harry noticed a shiny red and gold badge on his chest with the letter P on it. "Can't stay long, Mother," he said. "I'm up front. The Perfects have got 2 compartments to themselves." "Oh, are you a Perfect, Percy?" said one of the twins, with an air of great surprise. "You should have said something. We had no idea." "Hang on, I think I remember him saying something about it," said the other twin. "Once or twice. A minute. All summer." "Oh, shut up," said Percy the Perfect. "Come now, how come Percy gets new robes anyways?" said one of the twins. "Because he's a Perfect," said their mother fondly. All right, dear. Well, have a good term. Send me an owl when you get there. She kissed Percy on the cheek, and he left. Then she turned to the twins. Now you two, this year you behave yourselves. If I get one more owl telling me you've blown up a toilet or blown up a toilet. We've never blown up a toilet. Great idea though, Mom. Thanks, Mom. It's not funny, and don't look after Ron. Don't worry, Ickle Ronikins is safe with us. Shut up! Said Ron again. He was almost as tall as the twins already, and his nose was still pink where his mother had rubbed it. Hey, Mom, guess what? Guess who we just met on the train? Harry leaned back quickly so they couldn't see him looking. You know that black-haired boy who was near us in the station? Know who he is? Who? Harry Potter. Harry heard the little girl's voice. Oh, Mom, can I go on the train and see him? Mom, oh, please. You've already seen him, Ginny, and the poor boy isn't something you Google in a zoo. Is he really, Fred? How do you know? Asked him, saw a scar. It's really there, like lightning. Poor dear, no wonders he was alone. I wondered. He was ever so polite when he asked how to get onto the platform. Never mind that. Do you think he remembers what you-know-who looks like? Their mother suddenly became very stern. I forbid you to ask him, Fred. No, don't you dare. As though he needs reminding of that on his first day of school. All right, keep your hair on. A whistle sounded. Hurry up, said their mother, and the three boys clambered onto the train. They leaned out of the window for her to kiss them goodbye, and the younger sister began to cry. Don't, Jenny. We'll send you loads of owls. We'll send you a Hogwarts toilet seat. George! Only joking, Mom. The train began to move. Harry saw the boys' mother waving, and their sister, half laughing, half crying, running to keep up with the train until it gathered too much speed. Then she fell back and waved. Harry watched the girl with her mother disappear as the train rounded the corner. Houses flashed past the window. Harry felt a great leap of excitement. He didn't know what he was going to do, but it had to be better than what he was leaving behind. The door of the compartment slid open, and the youngest red-headed boy came in. Anyone sitting there? He asked, pointing at the seat beside Harry. Everywhere else is full. Harry shook his head, and the boy sat down. He glanced at Harry and then looked quickly out the window, pretending he didn't look. Harry saw he still had a black mark on his nose. Hey, Ron! The twins were back. Listen, we're going down to the middle of the train. Lee Jordan's got a gigantic tarantula down there. I was right, and those things are creepy. Right, muttered Ron. Harry, said the other twin. Did we introduce ourselves? Fred and George Weasley. And this is Ron, our brother. See you later, then. Bye, said Harry and Ron. The twins slid the compartment door shut behind them. Are you really Harry Potter? Ron blurted out. Harry nodded. Oh, well, I thought it might have been one of Fred and George's jokes, said Ron. And have you really got, He pointed at Harry's forehead. Harry pulled back his bangs to show the lightning scar. Ron stared. So, that's where you-know-who. Yes, said Harry, but I can't remember it. Nothing, said Ron eagerly. Well, I remember a lot of green light, but nothing else. Wow, said Ron. He sat and stared at Harry for a few more minutes. Then, as though he had suddenly realized what he was doing, he looked quickly out of the window again. Are all your family wizards? Asked Harry, who found Ron just as interesting as Ron found him. Yes, I think so, said Ron. I think Mom's got a second cousin who's an accountant, but we never talk about him. So you must know loads of magic already. The Weasleys were clearly one of those old wizarding families the Pell Boy and Diagon Alley had talked about. I heard you went to live with Muggles, said Ron. What are they like? Horrible. Well, not all of them. My aunt, uncle, and cousin are, though. Wish I'd had 3 wizard brothers. 5, said Ron. For some reason, he looked gloomy. I'm the sixth in our family to go to Hogwarts. You could say I've got a lot to live up to. Bill and Charlie have already left. Bill was head boy and Charlie was captain of Quidditch. Now Percy's perfect. Fred and George mess around a lot, but they still get really good marks, and everyone thinks they're really funny. Everyone expects me to do as well as the others, but if I do, it's no big deal because they did it first. You never get anything new either. With 5 brothers, I've got Bill's old robes, Charlie's old wand, and Percy's old rats. Ron reached inside his jacket and pulled out a fat gray rat, which was asleep. His name's Scabbers, and he's useless. He hardly ever wakes up. Percy got an owl from my dad for being made a perfect, but they couldn't afford. I got Scabbers instead. Ron's ears went pink. He seemed to think he'd said too much, because he went back to staring out the window. Harry didn't think there was anything wrong with not being able to afford an owl. After all, he'd never had any money in his life until a month ago. And he told Ron so, all about having to wear Dudley's old clothes and never getting proper birthday presents. This seemed to cheer Ron up. And until Hagrid told me, I didn't know anything about being a wizard or about my parents or Voldemort. Ron gasped. What? Said Harry. You said you know whose name, said Ron, sounding both shocked and impressed. I'd have thought you, of all people. I'm not trying to be brave or anything, saying the name, said Harry. I just never knew you wouldn't. You shouldn't. See what I mean? I've got loads to learn, I bet, he added, voicing for the first time something that had been worrying him lately a lot. I bet I'm the worst in the class. You won't be. There's loads of people who come from Muggle families, and they learn quick enough. While they had been talking, the train had carried them out of London. Now, they were speeding past fields full of cows and sheep. They were quiet for a time, watching the fields and lanes flick past. Around 12:30, there was a great clattering. There was a great clattering outside in the corridor, and a smiling, dimpled woman slid back their door and said, "Anything off the cart, dear?" Harry, who hadn't had any breakfast, leaped to his feet. But Ron's ears went pink again, and he muttered that he'd brought sandwiches. Harry went out into the corridor. He had never had any money for candy with the Dursleys, and now that he had pockets rattling with gold and silver, he was ready to buy as many Mars bars as he could carry. But the woman didn't have Mars bars. What she did have were Barty Bott's every flavored beans, Jubilee's best blowing gum, chocolate frogs, pumpkin pastries, cauldron cakes, licorice wands, and a number of other strange things Harry had never seen in his life. Not wanting to miss anything, he got some of everything, and paid the woman 11 silver sickles and 7 bronze nuts. Ron stared as Harry brought it all back into the compartment and dipped it into an empty seat. Hungry, are you? Starving, said Harry, taking a large bite out of a pumpkin pastry. Ron had taken out a limpy package and unwrapped it. There were 4 sandwiches inside. He pulled one of them apart and said, "She always forgets I don't like corned beef." "Swamp you for one of these," said Harry, holding up the pastry. "Go on. You don't want this. It's all dry," said Ron. "She hasn't got much time," he added quickly. "You know, with the 5 of us." "Go on, have a pastry," said Harry, who had never had anything to share before, or indeed anyone to share it with. It was a nice feeling sitting there with Ron, eating their way through all Harry's pastries, cakes, and candies. The sandwiches lay forgotten. "What are these?" said Harry. Harry asked Ron, holding up a pack of chocolate frogs. They're not really frogs, are they? He was starting to feel that nothing would surprise him. No, said Ron, but see what the card is? I'm missing Agrippa. What? Oh, of course you wouldn't know. Chocolate frogs have cards inside them. You know, to collect famous witches and wizards. I've got about 500. But I haven't got Agrippa or Ptolemy. Harry unwrapped his chocolate frog and picked up the card. It showed a man's face. He wore half-moon glasses with a long, crooked nose and flowing silver hair, beard, and mustache. Underneath the picture was the name Albus Dumbledore. So this is Dumbledore, said Harry. Don't tell me you've never heard of Dumbledore, said Ron. Can I have a frog? I might get a Agrippa. Thanks. Harry turned over his card and read. Albus Dumbledore, currently headmaster of Hogwarts. Considered by many the greatest wizard of modern times, Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the great dark wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner, Nicholas Flamel. Professor Dumbledore enjoys chamber music and tin-pin bowling. Okay, wait, hold on. Grindelwald? So, wait, hold on. Before Voldemort, there was Grindelwald. So there's two... So there's two dark wizards. That would kind of make sense, since in the Muggle world you had the Great War, and you had World War One and World War Two. That would make sense. So Grindelwald is World War One. Voldemort from 1914 to 1918 is World War Two. Yep, okay, that makes sense. Harry turned the card back over and saw, to his astonishment, that Dumbledore's face had disappeared. He's gone. Well, you can't expect him to hang around all day, said Ron. He'll be back. No, I've got Morgana again, and I've gotten about 6 of her. Do you want it? You can start collecting. Ron's eyes strayed to the pile of chocolate frogs waiting to be unwrapped. Help yourself, said Harry. But in, the Muggle world, people just stay put in pictures. In photos. Do they? What? Do they? What? They don't move at all. Ron sounded amazed. Weird. Harry stared at Dumbledore's settled back into the picture on his card and gave him a small smile. Ron was more interested in eating the frogs than looking at the famous witches and wizard cards. But Harry couldn't keep his eyes off them. Soon he had not only Dumbledore and Morgana, but Hengist of Woodcraft, Albert Grinon, Siri, Parcellus, and Merlin. He finally tore his eyes away from the Drendels Cleodona, who was scratching her nose to open a bag of Bertie Bott's every flavored beans. Eee, I've tried those. I've gotten popcorn, blueberry, and rotten apples. Or no, rotten eggs. That's disgusting. You want to be careful with those, Ron warned Harry. When they say every flavor, they mean every flavor. You get all the ordinary ones, like chocolate and peppermint and marmalade. But then you can get spinach and liver and tripe. Okay, spinach isn't that bad. The only thing kind of bad is if you get Brussels sprouts. That's disgusting. George reckons he had a bigger flavored one once. He picked up a green bean, looked at it carefully, and bit into it. Blah! See? Sprouts. See, I told you! They had a good time eating. Aunt Nita's. They had a good time eating the ever-flavored beans. Harry got toast, coconut, baked beans, strawberries, curry, grass, coffee, sardine. Wait! It's cool.
Just finished it.
Cool. Sorry, it's my little brother. He's adorable. Don't tell him I said that though. They had a good time eating the every flavored beans. Harry got toast, coconut, baked beans, strawberry, curry, grass, coffee, sardine, and was even brave enough to nibble at the end of a funny gray one Ron wouldn't touch, which turned out to be Pepper. The countryside, now flying past the window, was becoming wilder. The neat fields had gone. Now there were woods, twisting rivers, and dark green hills. There was a knock on the door of their compartment, and the brown-faced boy Harry had passed on platform 9 3/4 came in. He looked tearful. "Sorry," he said, "but have you seen a toad at all?" Then, when they shook their heads, he wailed, "I've lost him! He keeps getting away from me." "He'll turn up," said Harry. Yes," said the boy miserably. "Well, if you see him." He left. "Don't know why he's so bothered," said Ron. "If I'd brought a toad, I'd lose it as quick as I could. Mind you, I brought Scabbers, so I can't talk." The rat was still snoozing on his road on Ron's lap. "He might have died, and you wouldn't know the difference," said Ron in disgust. "I tried to turn him yellow yesterday to make him more interesting, but the spell didn't work. I'll show you. Look." He rummaged around in his truck and pulled out a very battered-looking wand. It was chipped in places, and something white was glinting at the end. Unicorn's hair nearly poked out. Anyway, he had just raised his wand when the compartment door slid open again. The toadless boy was back, but this time he had a girl with him. She was already wearing her new Hogwarts robes. "Has anyone seen a toad? Neville's lost one," she said. She had a bossy sort of voice, lots of bushy brown hair, and a rather large front teeth. "We've already told him we haven't seen it," said Ron, but the girl wasn't listening. She was looking at the wand in his hand. "Oh, are you going to do magic? Let's see it, then." She sat down. Ron looked taken back. All right." Harry cleared his throat. "Sunshine daisies, buttermellow, turn this stupid fat rat yellow." Harry waved his wand, but nothing happened. Scabbers stayed gray and fast asleep. "Are you sure there's a real spell?" said the girl. "Well, it's not very good, is it? I've tried a few simple spells, just for practice, and it's all worked for me. Nobody in my family's magic at all. It was ever such a surprise when I got my letter, but I was ever so pleased, of course. I mean, it's the very best school of witchcraft there is, I've heard. I've learned all of our course books by heart, of course. I just hope it will be enough. I'm Hermione Granger, by the way. Who are you?" She said all this very fast. Harry looked at Ron and was relieved to see by his stunned face that he hadn't learned all the course books by heart either. "I'm Ron Weasley," Ron muttered. "Harry Potter," said Harry. "Are you really?" said Hermione. "I know all about you, of course. I got a few extra books for background reading, and you're in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts and great wizarding events of the 12th century." "Am I?" said Harry, feeling dazed. "Goodness, didn't you know? I'd have found out everything I could if it was me," said Hermione. "Do either of you know what house she'll be in?" "I've been asking around, and I hope I'm in Gryffindor. It sounds by far the best. I hear Dumbledore himself was in it, but I suppose Ravenclaw wouldn't be too bad. Anyway, we'd better go and look for Neville's toad. You two had better change. I'll expect we'll be there soon." And she left, taking the toadless boy with her. "Whatever house I'm in, I hope she's not in," said Ron. "Ron, seriously? Be nice, you just met her." "Jeez." He threw his wand back into his truck. "Stupid spell. George gave it to me. Bet he knew it was a dud." "What house are your brothers in?" said Harry. "Gryffindor," said Ron. Gloom steamed Gloom seemed to be settling on his face again. Mom and Dad were in it too. I don't know what they'll say if I'm not. I don't suppose Ravenclaw would be too bad, but imagine if they put me in Slytherin. Okay, what is so bad about Slytherin? Doesn't mean you're evil. Yes, Voldemort and Bellatrix Lestrange and Lucius Malfoy and Regulus Black were all in it, but yeah, okay, I see the point. Yeah, I see why they think Hogwarts house is pretty much evil and set for doom. It's not that bad. I mean, Snape was in it, and he's a spy for both sides. He's not evil. He's just ways to put Snape. Hmm. He's just misunderstood. That's all. That's the house full. I mean, you know who was in. Yeah, said Ron. He flopped back into his seat, looking depressed. You know, I think the end of Scabbers Whiskers are a bit later, said Harry, trying to take Ron's minds off houses. So what do your older brothers do now that they've left anyway? Harry was wondering what a wizard did once he'd finished school. Charlie's in Romania studying dragons, and Bill's in Africa doing something for Gringotts. And Ron, said Ron, did you hear about Gringotts? It's been all over the Daily Prophet, but I don't suppose you get that with the Muggles. Someone tried to rob a high-security vault. Harry stared. Really? What happened to them? Nothing. That's why it's such a big news. They haven't been caught. My dad says must have been a powerful wizard to get around Gringotts, but they don't think they took anything. That's very odd. Of course, everyone gets scared when something like this happens in case you know who's behind it. Harry turned this news over in his mind. He was starting to get a prickle of the fear every time you-know-who was mentioned. He supposed this was all part of entering the magical world, but it had been a lot more comfortable saying Voldemort without worrying. What's your Quidditch team? Said Ron. Ron asked. I don't know any. Harry confessed. What? Ron looked dumbfounded. Oh, you wait. It's the best game in the world. And he was off, explaining all about the 4 bowls and the positions of the 7 players, describing famous games he'd seen with his brothers, and the broomstick he'd like to get if he had the money. He was just taking Harry through the finer points of the game, when the compartment door slid open yet again. But it wasn't Neville, the toadless boy, or Hermione Granger this time. 3 boys entered, and Harry recognized the middle one at once. It was the pale boy from Madame Malkin's robe shop. He was looking at Harry with a lot more interest than he had shown back in Diagon Alley. Is it true, he said. They're saying all down the train that Harry Potter's in this compartment. So it's you, isn't it? Yes, said Harry. He was looking at the other boys. Both of them were thicker and looked extremely mean. Standing on either side of the paler boy, they looked like bargains. Oh, this is Crabbe and Mrs. Goyle, said the paler boy, carelessly, noticing Harry was looking. And my name's Malfoy, Draco Malfoy. Dear God, there's going to be trouble. Ron gave a slight cough, which might have been hiding a snicker. Draco Malfoy looked at him. Think my name's funny, do you? No need to ask who you are. My father told me all about the Weasleys. Have red hair, freckles, and more children than they can afford. Okay, you need to chill the crap out, dude. He turned back to Harry. You'll soon find out some wizarding families are much better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there. He held out his hand to shake Harry's, but Harry didn't take it. I think I can tell the wrong sort who the wrong sort are for myself. Thanks, he said coolly. Draco Malfoy didn't go red. but a pink tinge appeared on his pale cheeks. "I'd be careful if I were you, Potter," he said slowly. "Unless you're a bit politer, you'll go the same way as your parents. They didn't know what was good for them, either. You hang around that riffraff like the Weasleys and that Hagrid, and it'll rub off on you." "Okay, Draco, you need to chill your little butt out, dude. Swear you need to be smacked upon the head, or put in timeout or something." Both Harry and Ron stood up. "Say that again," Ron said, his face as red as his hair. "Oh, you're going to fight us, are you?" Malfoy sneered. "Unless you get out of here now," said Harry more bravely than he felt, because Crabbe and Goyle were a lot bigger than him or Ron. "But we don't feel like leaving, do we, boys? We've eaten all our food, and you still seem to have some." Goyle reached towards the chocolate frogs next to Ron. Ron leaped forward, but before he'd as much as touched Goyle, Goyle let out a horrible yell. Scabbers the rat was hanging off his finger, sharp little teeth sunk deep into Goyle's knuckle. Crabbe and Malfoy backed away as Goyle swung Scabbers around and around, hollering, and when Scabbers finally flew off and hit the window, all three of them disappeared at once. Before they thought there were Perhaps they thought there were more rats lurking among the sweets, or perhaps they'd heard footsteps, because a second later Hermione Granger had come in. "What has been going on?" she said, looking at the sweets all over the floor and Ron picking up Scabbers by his tail. "I think he's been knocked out," Ron said to Harry. "No, Harry." He looked closely at Scabbers. "No, I don't believe it. He's gone back to sleep." And so he had. "You've met Malfoy before," Harry explained about their meeting in Diagon Alley. "I've heard of his family," said Ron darkly. They were some of the first to come back to our side after you know who disappeared. Said they'd been bewitched. My dad doesn't believe it. He says Malfoy's father didn't need an excuse to go over to the dark side." He turned to Hermione. "Can we help you with something?" "You'd better hurry up and put your robes on. I've just been up to the front to ask the conductor, and he says we're nearly there." "You haven't been fighting, have you? You'll be in trouble before we even get there." "Scabbers has been fighting, not us." "Oh, you two sound like two 4-year-old children fighting. Knock it off," said Ron, scowling at her. "Would you mind leaving while we change?" "All right. I only came in here because people outside are behaving very childishly, racing up and down the corridors," said Hermione in a sniffy voice. "And you've got dirt on your nose, by the way. Did you know?" Ron glared at her as she left. Harry peered out the window. It was getting dark. He could see mountains and forests under a deep purple sky. The train did seem to be slowing down. He and Ron took off their jackets and pulled onto their long black robes. Ron's were a bit short for him. You could see his sneakers underneath them. A voice echoed through the train. We will be reaching Hogwarts in 5 minutes. Please leave your luggage on the train. It will be taken to the school separately." Harry's stomach lurched with nerves as Ron, he saw, looked paler under his freckles. They crammed their pockets with the last of the sweets and joined the crowd thronging the corridor. The train slowed right down and finally stopped. People pushed their way towards the door and out of it onto a tiny dark platform. Harry shivered in the cold night air. Then a lamp came bobbing over the heads of the students, and Harry heard a familiar voice. First years over here. All right there, Harry." Hagrid's big, hairy face beamed over the sea of heads. Come on, follow me. Any more first years? Mind your step now. First years, follow me." Slipping and stumbling, they followed Hagrid down what seemed to be a steep, narrow path. It was so dark on either side of them that Harry thought there must have been thick trees there. Nobody spoke much. Neville, the boy who kept losing his toads, sniffed once or twice. "You'll get your first sight of Hogwarts in a second, Hagrid called over his shoulder. Just round this bend here. There was a loud ooh. The narrow path had opened suddenly on the edge of a great black lake. Perched atop a high mountain on the other side, its windows sparkled in the starry sky. It was a vast castle with many turrets and towers. No more than 4 in a boat, Hagrid called, pointing to a fleet of little boats sitting on the water by the shore. Harry and Ron were followed into their boat by Neville and Hermione. Yee! They're at Hogwarts! Ah, darn it, I just closed my book. Oh, I got it. We're good. Everyone in, shouted Hagrid, who had a boat to himself. Right then, forward! And the fleet of little boats moved off all at once, gliding across the lake, which was as smooth as glass. Everyone was silent, staring up at the great castle overhead. It towered over them as they sailed nearer and nearer to the cliff on which it stood. Heads down, yelled Hagrid as the first boats reached the cliff. They all bent their heads, and the little boats carried them through a curtain of ivy that had a wide opening in the cliff face. They were carried along a dark tunnel which seemed to be taking them right underneath the castle until they reached a kind of underground harbour, where they clambered out onto the rocks and pebbles. "Oi, you there! Is this your Toad?" said Hagrid, who was checking the boats as people climbed out of them. "Trevor!" said Neville briskly. "Yeah."
Do you have any bubbles?
Huh?
Bubbles!
No? Why would I have bubbles? Stop screaming.
I gave you some bubbles for school. And me and Chelsea are blowing bubbles and I can't find bubbles. So she keep on popping mine.
Vicky, it is in the middle of July. Well, not the middle of July, but it's July.
Oh well.
They're probably in my bag that I haven't even unpacked. I haven't even bothered to. That's school. Everything's good. Trevor! cried Neville blissfully, holding out his hands. Then they clambered up a passageway in the rock after Hagrid's lamp, coming out at last onto smooth, damp grass in the shadow of the castle. They walked up a flight of stone steps and crowded around the huge oak front door. "Everyone here? You there, still got your Toad?" Hagrid raised a gigantic fist and knocked 3 times on the castle door. Ah! Yay! Chapter 7, The Sorting Hats! Chapter 8, it's not that long.
I love you.
Chapter 9. Love you too. Oh, I meant chapter 7. Chapter 7, The Sorting Hat. The door swung open at once. A tall, black-haired witch in emerald green robes stood there. She had a very stern face, and Harry's first thought was that this was not someone to cross. "The first year's, Professor McGonagall," said Hagrid. "Thank you, Hagrid. I will take them from here." She pulled the door wide. The entrance hall was so big you could have fit the whole of the Dursleys' house in it. The stone walls were lit with flaming torches like the ones at Hagrid's. Like the ones at Gringotts. The ceiling was too high to make out, and a magnificent marbled staircase facing them led to the upper floors. They followed Professor McGonagall across the flagstone floor. Harry could hear the drone of hundreds of voices from a doorway to the right. The rest of the school must have already be here. But Professor McGonagall showed the first years to a small empty chamber off the hall. They crowded in, standing rather close to each other than they would have usually have done, peering nervously around. "Welcome to Hogwarts," said Professor McGonagall. "The start of term banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats in the great hall, you will be sorted into your houses. The sorting is a very important ceremony because while you are here, your house will be something like your family within Hogwarts. You will have classes with the rest of your house, sleep in your house dormitory, and spend free time in your house common room. The 4 houses are called Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Each house has its own noble history, and each has produced outstanding witches and wizards. While you are at Hogwarts, your triumphs will earn your house points, while any rule breaking will lose house points. At the end of the year, the house with the most points is awarded the House Cup, a great honor. I hope each of you will be a credit to whichever house becomes yours. The sorting ceremony will take place in a few minutes in front of the rest of the school. I suggest you all smarten yourselves up as much as you can while you're waiting. Her eyes lingered for a moment on Nibbles' cloak, which was fastened under his left ear, and on Ron's smudged nose. Harry nervously tried to flatten his hair. "I shall return when we are ready for you," said Professor McGonagall. "Please wait quietly." She left the chamber. Harry swallowed. "How exactly do they sort us into houses?" he asked Ron. "Some sort of test, I think. Fred said it hurts a lot, but I think he was joking." "Really, Fred? Really? You're going to torture Ron on his first day of school. What is wrong with you?" Harry's heart gave a horrible jolt. A test. In front of the whole school, but he didn't even know any magic yet. What on earth would he have to do? He hadn't expected like this. He hadn't expected something like this the moment they arrived. He looked around anxiously and saw that everyone else looked terrified too. No one was talking much except Hermione Granger, who was whispering very fast about all the spells she'd learned and wondering which one she needed. Harry tried hard not to listen to her. He'd never been more nervous, not even when he had to take a school report home to the Dursleys, saying that he'd somehow turned his teacher's wig blue. He kept his eyes fixed on the door. Any second now, Professor McGonagall would come back and lead him to his doom. Then something happened that made him jump from about a foot in the air. Several people behind him screamed. "What the?" Beep. Harry gasped. So did the people around him. About 20 ghost heads streamed through the back wall. Pearly white and slightly transparent, they glided across the room, talking to one another and hardly glancing at the first years. They seemed to be arguing. What looked like a fat little monk was saying, "Forgive and forget, I say. We ought to give him a second chance." "My dear Frere, haven't we given Peeves all the chances he deserves? He gives us all a bad name, and you know he's not exactly even a ghost. I say, what are you all doing here?" A ghost wearing a ruff and tights had suddenly noticed the first years. The first years. Hello." Nobody answered. "New students," said the fat Frere, smiling at them. "About to be sorted, I suppose?" A few of them nodded mutely. "Hope to see you in Hufflepuff," said the Frere. "My old house, you know." "Move along now," said a sharp voice. "The sorting ceremony's about to start." Professor McGonagall had returned. One by one, the ghosts floated away through the opposite wall. "Now, form a line," Professor McGonagall told the first years, "and follow me." Finally, feeling oddly as though his legs had turned to lead, Harry got into the line behind a boy with sandy hair, with Ron behind him, and they walked out of the chamber, back across the hall, and through a pair of double doors into the great hall. Harry had never even imagined such a strange and splendid place. It was lit by thousands and thousands of candles that were floating in midair over 4 long tables where the rest of the students were sitting. These tables were laid with glittering golden plates and goblets. At the top of the hall was another long table where the teachers were sitting. Professor McGonagall led the first years up here so that they came to a halt in a line facing the other students, with the teachers behind them. The hundreds of faces staring at them looked like pale lanterns in the flickering candlelight. Dotted here and there among the students, the ghosts shone misty silver, mainly to avoid all the staring eyes. Harry looked upward and saw a velvety black ceiling dotted with stars. He heard Hermione whisper, "It's bewitched to look like the sky outside." I read all about it. I read all about it in Hogwarts history. It was hard to believe that there was a ceiling there at all, and that the Great Hall didn't simply open onto the heavens. Harry quickly looked down again as Professor McGonagall silently placed a four-legged stool in front of the first years. On top of the stool, she put a pointed hat. This hat was patched and frayed and extremely dirty. Petunia wouldn't have let it in the house. Maybe they had to try and get a rabbit out of it. Harry thought wildly. That seemed the sort of thing. Noticing that everyone in the hall was now staring at the hat, he stared at it too. For a few seconds there was complete silence. Then the hat twitched. A rip near the brim opened wide like a mouth, and the hat began to sing. Oh, you may not think I'm pretty, but don't judge on what you see. I'll eat myself if you can find a smarter hat than me. You can keep your bowlers black, your top hat sleek and tall, for I'm the Hogwarts sorting hat, and I can cap them all. There's nothing hidden in your head the sorting hat can't see. So try me on, and I will tell you where you ought to be. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwelt the brave at heart. Their daring nerve and cavalry set Gryffindors apart. You might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Those patient Hufflepuffs are too, and unafraid of toil. Or yet in wise old Ravenclaw, if you're a ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind. Or perhaps in Slytherin, you'll make your real friends. Those cunning folks use any means to achieve their ends. So put me on, don't be afraid, and don't get in a flap. You're in a safe hands, though I don't have none, for I'm a thinking cap. The most weirdest song ever. I'm a Gryffindor, so. The whole hall burst into applause as the hat finished its song. It bowed to each of the four tables and then became quite still again. So we've just got to try on the hats, Ron whispered to Harry. I'll kill Fred. He was going on about weird wrestling a troll. Really, Fred? That's not even polite or nice. Jeez, wrestling a troll. Are you out of your mind? Harry smiled weakly. Yes, trying on the hat was a lot better than having to do a spell, but he did wish they could have tried it on without everyone watching. The hat seemed to be asking rather a lot of questions. Rather a lot. Harry didn't feel brave or quick-witted or any of it at the moment. If only the hat had mentioned a house for people who felt a bit queasy, that would have been the one for him. Professor McGonagall now stepped forward, holding a long roll of parchment. When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted, she said. Hannah Abbott. A pink-faced girl with blonde pigtails stumbled out of line, put on the hat, which fell right down over her eyes, and sat down. A moment's pause. Hufflepuff! Shouted the hat. The table on the right cheered and clapped as Hannah went to sit down at the Hufflepuff table. Harry saw the ghost of the fat fairy waving merrily at her. Susan Bones? Hufflepuff! Shouted the hat again, and Susan scuttled off to sit next to Hannah. Terry Boot? Ravenclaw! The table second from the left clapped this time. Several Ravenclaws stood up to shake hands with Terry as he joined them. Mandy Bracklehurst went to Ravenclaw, too, but Lavender Brown became the first new Gryffindor. And the table on the far left exploded with cheers. Harry could see Ron's twin brothers calling. Millicent Bulstrode then became a Slytherin. Perhaps it was Harry's imagination. After all, he learned about Slytherin, but he thought they looked like an unpleasant lot. He was starting to feel definitely sick now. He remembered being picked for teams during gym at his old school. He had always been last to be chosen, Not because he was not good, but because no one wanted Dudley to think they liked him. Justin Finch Fletchley. That is a weird name, but okay. Hufflepuff! Sometimes Harry noticed that the hat shouted out the house at once, but at others it took a little while to decide. Seamus Finnegan, the sandy-haired boy next to Harry in line, sat on the stool for almost a whole minute before the hat declared him Gryffindor. Hermione Granger. Hermione almost ran to the stool and jammed the hat eagerly on her. Gryffindor! Shouted at the hat. Ron groaned. A horrible thought struck Harry, as horrible thoughts always do when you're very nervous. What if he wasn't chosen at all? What if he just sat there with the hat over his eyes for ages, until Professor McGonagall jerked it off his head and said had obviously been a mistake and he'd better go back on the train. When Neville Longbottom, the boy who kept losing his toad, was called, he fell over on his way to the stool. The hat took a long time to decide Neville. When it finally shouted Gryffindor, Neville ran off, still wearing it. And he had to drop back amid gales of laughter to give it back to Morgan McDougal. Poor Neville. Malfoy swaggered forward when his name was called, and got his wish at once. The hat had barely touched his head when it screamed, Slytherin. Yay. Malfoy went to join his friends, Crabbe and Goyle looking pleased with himself. There wasn't many people left now. Moon, not Parkinson, then a pair of twins, Patel and Patel, then Parks, Sally Ann, and then at last, Harry Potter! As Harry stepped forward, whispers suddenly broke out like little hissing fires all over the hall. Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter. Why is everyone so surprised about Harry? I mean, jeez. It's ridiculous. The last thing Harry saw before the hat dropped over his eyes was a hall full of people craning to get a good look at him. Next second, he was looking at the black inside the hat. He waited. Said the hat, said a small voice in his ear. Difficult, very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind, either. There's talent? Oh, goodness. Oh, my goodness. Yes. And a nice thirst to prove yourself. Now that's very interesting. So where shall I put you? Harry gripped the edge of the stool and thought, Not Slytherin. Not Slytherin. Not Slytherin, eh? Said the small voice. Aren't you sure? You could be great, you know. It's all there in your head, Slytherin. And Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that. No? Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor! Harry heard the hat shout the last word to the whole hall. He took off the hat and walked shakily towards the Gryffindor table. He was so relieved he had been chosen and not put in Slytherin. He hardly noticed that he was getting the loudest cheers yet. Percy, the prefect, got up and shook his hand vigorously while the Weasley twins yelled, We got Potter! We got Potter! Yep, that sounds like Fred and George. He's hollering. Harry sat down opposite of the ghost in the ruffle he'd seen earlier. The ghost patted him on his arm, giving Harry the sudden horrible feeling he'd just plunged into a bucket of ice-cold water. He could see the high table properly now. At the end nearest him sat Hagrid, who caught his eye and gave him the thumbs up. Harry grinned back, and there, in the center of the high table, in a large gold chair, sat Albus Dumbledore. Harry recognized him at once. From the card he'd gotten out of the chocolate frog on the train, Dumbledore's silvery hair was the only thing in the whole hall that shone as brightly as a ghost. Harry spotted Professor Quirrell, too, the nervous young man from the Leaky Cauldron, who was looking very particular in a large purple turban. And now there were only 4 people left to be sorted. Dean Thomas, a black boy even taller than Ron, joined Harry at the Gryffindor table. Lisa Tarvin became the Ravenclaw, and then it was Ron's turn. He was pale green by now. Harry crossed his fingers under the table, and a second later the hat shouted, "Gryffindor!" Harry clapped loudly with the rest as Ron collapsed into the chair next to him. "Well done, Ron. Excellent," said Percy Weasley pompously. Across Harry, as Blade Zeppelin was made a Slytherin, Professor McGonagall rolled up her scroll and took the soaring hat away. Harry looked down at his empty plate. He had only just realized how hungry he was. The pumpkin pastry seemed ages ago. Albus Dumbledore had gotten to his feet. He was beaming at the students, his arms open wide, as if nothing could have pleased him more than to see them all there. "Welcome," he said. "Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquets, I would like to say a few words. And here they are. Nitwit, Blunder, Oddman, Tweak. Thank you." "Okay. We're one strange man. Intelligent, but strange." He sat back down. Everybody clapped and cheered. Harry didn't know whether to laugh or not. "Is he a bit mad?" said Percy. He asked Percy uncertainly. "Mad," said Percy airily. "He's a genius, best wizard in the world, but he is a bit mad, yes. Potatoes, Harry." Harry's mouth fell open. The dishes in front of him were now piled full. He had never seen so many things. He liked to eat out on one table: roast beef, roast chicken, pork chops and lamb chops, sausages, bacon and steak, boiled potatoes, fries, Yorkshire pudding, peas, carrots, gravy, ketchup, and for some strange reason, peppermint humbugs. What the heck is a humbug? I'll look it up later. If you know what a humbug is, comment down below, because I have no idea what it is. The Dursleys had never exactly starved Harry, but he'd never been allowed to eat as much as he liked. Dudley had always taken anything that Harry really wanted, even if it made him sick. Harry piled his plate with a bit of everything except the peppermints and began to eat. It was all delicious. That does look good," said the ghost and ruffled sadly, watching Harry cut up his steak. "Can't you? I haven't eaten for nearly 500 years," said the ghost. "I don't need to, of course, but one does miss it. I don't think I've introduced myself. Sir Nicholas de Misby Parpington, at your service, resident ghost of Hogwarts Tower. Gryffindor Tower. My bad." "I know who you are," said Ron suddenly. "My brothers told me all about you. You're Nicholas. You're nearly Headless Nick." "I would prefer you call me Sir Nicholas de Misby," the ghost began stiffly, but sandy-haired Seamus Finnegan interrupted. "Nearly Headless Nick? How do you become nearly headless?" "Serious?" Sir Nicholas looked extremely muffled, as if their little chat wasn't going at all the way he wanted. "Like this," he said irritably. He seized his left ear and pulled. His whole head swung off his neck and fell onto his shoulder as if it was in a hinge. Someone had obviously tried to behead him, but not done it properly. Looking pleased at the stunned looks on their faces, Nearly Headless Snake flipped his head back onto his neck and coughed and said, "So, new Gryffindors, I hope you're going to help us win the house championship this year. Gryffindor has never gone so long without winning. Slytherin has got the cup 6 years in a row. The Bloody Baron's become almost unbearable. He's a Slytherin ghost." Harry looked over at the Slytherin table and saw a horrible ghost sitting there with blank staring eyes, a gaunt face, and robes stained with silver blood. He was right next to Malfoy, who, Harry was pleased to see, didn't look too pleased with the seating arrangements. "How did he get covered in blood?" asked Seamus with great interest. "I've never asked," said Nearly Headless Snake delicately. Okay, so I will explain that. Okay, so Rowena. Okay, so the Great Lady, also known, I think, Helga. Wait, no, that's Helga Hufflepuff. I think her name's Helena. I think I'm not really sure, but she's called the Great Lady. She's the ghost of Ravenclaw Tower. Okay, so when she left Hogwarts, the Red Baron had asked her to come back to Hogwarts with him and marry him, and she told him no, and he got really, really mad at her, and he killed her. And he killed him, and he was so sad that when he realized what he had done, he was really sad, so he killed himself. And so now they both haunt Hogwarts. And that is why she is called the Grey Lady, because she's always sad. And he's called the Bloody Baron because he has blood. Yeah, it's really sad. When everyone had eaten as much as they could, the remains of the food faded from the plates, leaving them sparkling clean as before. A moment later, the desserts appeared. Blocks of ice cream in every flavor you could think of. Apple pies, treacle tarts, chocolate eclairs, and jam donuts. Trifles, strawberries, jello, rice pudding. As Harry helped himself to a treacle tart, the talk turned to the families. "I'm half and half," said Seamus. "My dad's a muggle. Mom didn't tell him she was a witch till after they were married. Bit of a nasty shock for him." The others laughed. "What about you, Neville?" said Ron. "Well, my grand's brought me up, and she's a witch," said Neville. "But the family thought I was muggle all muggle for ages. My great uncle Algie kept trying to catch me off guard and force some magic out of me. He pushed me off the end of the Blackpool pier once. I nearly drowned, but nothing happened until I was 8. Great Uncle Algie came around for dinner, and he was hanging me out of an upstairs window by the ankle when Great Aunt Auntie Edna offered him a meringue, and he accidentally let go. I bounced all the way down the garden and into the road. They were all really pleased. Gran was crying; she was so happy, and you could have seen their faces when I got there. When I got here, they thought I might not be magic enough to come. You see, Great Uncle Algie was so pleased he brought me my toad." On Harry's other side, Percy Weasley and Hermione were talking about lessons. "I do hope they start right away. There's so much to learn. I'm particularly interested in transfiguration, turning something into something else, of course. It's supposed to be very difficult. You'll be starting small, just matches into needles and that sort of thing." Harry, who was starting to feel warm and sleepy, looked up at the high table again. Hagrid was drinking deeply from his goblet. Professor McGonagall was talking to Professor Dumbledore. Professor Quirrell, in his absurd turban, was talking to a teacher with greasy black hair, a hook nose, and jealous skin. It happened very suddenly. The hook-nosed teacher looked past Quirrell's turban straight into Harry's eyes, and a sharp, hot pain shot across the scar on Harry's forehead. "Ouch!" Harry clasped a hand to his head. Excuse me. "What is it?" said Percy. "Nothing." The pain had gone as quickly as it came. Harder to shake off was the feeling Harry had gotten from the teacher's look, a feeling that he didn't like Harry at all. "Who's that teacher talking to Professor Quirrell?" he asked Percy. "Oh, Quirrell's already, do you? No wonder he's looking so nervous. That's Professor Snape. He teaches potions. But he doesn't want to. Everyone knows he's after Quirrell's job. Knows an awful lot about the dark arts. Snape." Harry watched Snape for a while, but Snape didn't look at him again. At last, the desserts tea disappeared. Professor Dumbledore got to his feet again. The hall fell silent. "Just a few more words now now that we are all fed and watered. I have a few start-term notices to give you." Shouldn't you have started that at the beginning, not the end of this? "First years should note that the forest on the ground is forbidden to all pupils. And a few of our older students who would do well to remember that as well." Okay, technically, I don't see how it's forbidden, even though, you've got a gigantic spider in there. You've got centaurs and unicorns. Besides the spider, I don't see what's so bad about it. Dumbledore's twinkling eye flashed in the direction of the Weasley twins. "I have also been asked by Mr. Filch, the caretaker, to remind you that no magic should be used between classes in the corridors. Quidditch trials will be held in the second week of the term. Anyone interested in their house teams should contact Madam Hooch. And finally, I must tell you that this year the third-year floor quarter on the right-hand side is out of bounds to everyone who does not wish to die a very painful death. Just Harry laughed, but he was one of the few who did. He's not serious, he muttered to Percy. Must be, said Percy, frowning at Dumbledore. It's odd, because he usually gives us a reason why we're not allowed to go up somewhere. The forest, full of dangerous beasts, everyone knows that. I do think he might have told us perfects at least. And now, before we go to bed, let us sing the school song, cried Dumbledore. Harry noticed that the other teacher's smiles had become rather fixed. Dumbledore gave his wand a little flick, as if he was trying to get a fly off the end, and a long golden ribbon flew out of it, which rose high above the table and twisted itself, snake-like, unto the words. Everyone picked their favorite tune, said Dumbledore, and off we go. And the school bellowed, Hogwarts, Hogwarts, Hoggy, Worts, Hogwarts. Teach us something, please, whether we be old and bald, or young with scabby knees. Our heads could do with filling with some interesting stuff, for now they're bare and full of air, dead flies and bits of fluff. So teach us things worth knowing, bring back what we've forgotten, just do your best, we'll do the rest, and learn until our brains are all rot. Everybody finished the song at different times. At last, only the Weasley twins were left singing along to a very slow funeral march. Dumbledore conducted the last few lines with his wand, and then they had finished. He was one of those who clapped loudest. Oh, my lord. Ah, music, he said, wiping his eyes. A magic beyond all we do here. And now, bedtime, off you trot. The Gryffindor... Let me see how far... We are to... Oh, well, we're almost at chapter 8. Okay. Off you trot. The Gryffindor first years followed Percy through the clattering crowds, out of the great hall, and up the marble staircase. Harry's legs were like lead again, but only because he was so tired and full of food. He was too sleepy even to be surprised that the people in the porches along the corridors whispered and pointed as they passed, or that twice Percy had led them through doorways hidden behind sliding panels and hanging tapestries. They climbed more staircases, yawning, dragging their feet, and Harry was just wondering how much further they had to go when they came to a sudden halt. A bundle of walking sticks was floating in midair ahead of them as Percy took a step towards them as they started throwing themselves at him. Peeves, Percy whispered to the first choose. A poltergeist. He raised his voice. Peeves, show yourself. A loud, rude sound, like the air being let out of a balloon, answered. Do you want me to get the Red Baron? To get the Bloody Baron? There was a flat pop, and a little man with wicked dark eyes and a wide mouth appeared, floating cross-legged into the air, clutching onto the wooden sticks. Ooh, he said with an evil cackle. Icky firsties! What fun! That was kind of like I was possessed. He spoke suddenly at them. They all ducked. Go away, Peeves, or the Baron will hear about this. I mean it, barked Percy. Peeves stuck out his tongue and vanished, dropping the walking sticks on Neville's head. Ah, poor Neville. He heard them zooming away, rattling coats of armor as he passed. You want to watch out for Peeves, said Percy as they set off again. The Bloody Baron's the only one who can control him. He won't even listen to us perfects. Here we are. At the very end of the corridor hung a portrait of a very fat woman in a pink silk dress. Password, she said. Capicut Draconis, said Percy, and the portrait swung forward to reveal a round hole in the wall. They all scampered through it. Neville needed a leg up and found themselves in the Gryffindor common room, a cozy round room full of squishy armchairs. Percy directed the girls through one door to their dormitories and the boys through another. At the top of the spiral staircases, they were obviously in one of the towers. They found their beds at last, 5 four-posters hung with deep red velvet curtains. Their trunks had already been brought up, too tired to talk much. They pulled on their pajamas and fell into bed. Great food, isn't it? Ron muttered to Harry through the hangings. Get off, Scabbers, you're streaming my sheets. Harry was going to ask Ron if he had any of the treacle tart, but he fell asleep almost at once. Perhaps Harry had eaten a bit too much, because he had a very strange dream. He was wearing Professor Quirrell's turban, which kept talking to him, telling him he must transfer to Slytherin at once, because it was his destiny. Harry told the turban he didn't want to be in Slytherin. It got heavier and heavier. He tried to pull it off, but it tightened painfully, and there was Malfoy laughing at him as he struggled with it. The Malfoy turned into the hook-nosed teacher of Snape, who was laughing at laugh became high and cold. There was a burst of green light, and Harry woke. Sweating and shaking, Harry rolled over and fell asleep again. And then he woke the next day. He didn't remember the dream. That's just creepy! Jeez, I've had weird dreams as well, but that's creepy! Chapter 8, The Potions Master. We get to meet Snape! Yay! There. Look! Where? Next to the tall kid with red hair. His name's Ron. Where? Wearing the glasses. Did you see his face? Did you see his scar? Whispers followed Harry from the moment he left his dormitory the next day. People lining up outside classrooms stood on tiptoe to get a look at him, or doubled back to pass him in the corridors, again staring. Harry wished they wouldn't, because he was trying to concentrate on finding his way to his classes. There was 142 staircases at Hogwarts, wide sweeping ones, narrow rickety ones, some that led somewhere different on Friday, some with a vanishing step halfway up that you had to remember to jump. Then there were doors that wouldn't open unless you asked politely or tickled them in exactly the right place, and doors that weren't really doors at all, but solid walls just pretending. It was always very hard to remember where everything was, because it all seemed to move around a lot. The people on the porches kept going in to visit each other, and Harry was sure the coats of armor could talk. The ghosts didn't help either. It was always a nasty shock when one of them glided suddenly through a door you were trying to open. Nearly Head the Snake was always happy to point out new Gryffindors in the right directions. But Peeves, the poltergeist, was worth 2 locked doors and a tricky staircase if you met him when you were late for class. He would drop waste paper baskets on your head, pull rugs from under your feet, pelt you with bits of chocolate, or sneak up behind you and invisible, grab your nose and screech, I got your conch. What the crap? Peeves, knock it off. Even worse than Peeves, if that was possible, was the caretaker, August Filch. Harry and Ron managed to get on the wrong side of him on their very first morning. Filch found them trying to force their way through a door that unluckily turned out to be the entrance to the out-of-bounds corridor on the 3rd floor. He wouldn't believe that they were lost. Was sure they were trying to break into it on purpose, and was starting to lock them into the dungeon when they were rescued by Professor Quirrell, who was passing. Filch owned a cat called Mrs. Norris, a scraunchy, dust-colored creature with bulging lamp-like eyes just like Filch's. She patrolled the corridors alone, break a rule in front of her, but just one toe out of line, and she'd whisk off for Filch, who appeared wheezing 2 seconds later. Filch knew the sacred passageway of the school better than anyone, except perhaps the Weasley twins, and could pop up as sudden as any of the ghosts. The students all hated him, and it was dearest ambition to give Mrs. Norris a good kick. She's just a cat! Leave her alone! Jeez. Just a cat. And then, once you had managed to find them, there was the classes themselves. There was a lot more to magic, as Harry quickly found out, than waving your wand and saying a few funny words. They had to study the night skies through their telescopes every Wednesday at midnight and learn the names of different stars and movements of the planets. 3 times a week they went out to the garden house behind the castle to study horology with a dumpy little witch called Professor Spout, where they learned how to take care of all the strange plants and fungi and found out what they were used for. Easily the most boring class was History of Magic, which was the only one taught by a ghost. Professor Benz had been very old indeed when he fell asleep in front of the staff room fire, and got up the next morning to teach, leaving his body behind him. Ben drooped on and on while they scribbled down names and dates, and got Emmerich the Evil and Urch the Oddball mixed up. Professor Flickwick, the charms teacher, was a tiny little wizard who had to stand on a pile of books to see over his desk. And at the start of their first class, he took the roll call, and when he heard Ron's, and when he reached Harry's name, he gave an excited squeal and toppled out of sight. Professor McGonagall was again different. Harry had been quite right to think she wasn't a teacher to cross. Strict and clever, she gave them a talking to the moment they sat down in her first class. That's Professor McGonagall for you. Transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts, she said. Anyone messing around in my class will leave and not come back. You have been warned. I wonder if friend George got kicked out of her class. Then she changed her desk into a pig and back again. They were all very impressed and couldn't wait to get started, but soon realized they weren't going to be changing the furniture into animals for a long time. After taking a lot of complicated notes, they were each given a match and started trying to turn it into a needle. At the end of the lesson, only Hermione Granger had made any difference to her match. Professor McGonagall showed the class how it had gone all silver and pointy, and gave Hermione a rare smile. The class everyone had really been looking forward to was Defense Against the Dark Arts. But Quirrell's lessons turned out to be a bit of a joke. His classroom smelled strongly of garlic, which everyone said was to ward off a vampire he met in Romania, and was afraid would come back to get him one of these days. His turban, he told them, had been given to him by an African prince as a thank you for getting rid of a troublesome zombie, but they weren't sure they believed this story. For one thing, when Seamus Finnegan asked eagerly to hear about how Quirrell had fought off the zombie, Quirrell went pink and started talking about the weather. For another, they had noticed that a funny smell hung around the turban, and the Weasley twins insisted that it was stuffed full of garlic as well, so that Quirrell was protected wherever he went. Harry was very relieved to find out that he wasn't miles behind everyone else. Lots of people had come from noble families, and like him, hadn't had any idea that they were witches and wizards. There was so much to learn that even people like Ron didn't have much of a head start. Friday was an important day for Harry and Ron. They finally managed to find their way down the Great Hall for breakfast without getting lost once. "What have we got today?" said Harry. Harry asked Ron as he poured sugar onto his porridge. "Double potions with a Slytherins," said Ron. "Snape's head of the house. They say he always favors them. We'll be able to see if it's true." "I wish McGonagall favored us," said Harry. Professor McGonagall was the head of Gryffindor House, but it hadn't stopped her from giving them a huge pile of homework the day before. Just then the mail arrived. Harry had gotten used to this, by now, but it had given him a bit of a shock on the first morning when about 100 owls had suddenly streamed into the great hall during breakfast, circling the table until they saw their owners, and dropped the letters and packages onto their lap. Hedwig hadn't brought Harry anything so far. Sometimes she flew in to nib on his ear and give a bit of toast before going off to sleep in the owlery with the other school owls. This morning, however, she fluttered down between the marmalade and the sugar bowl and dropped a note onto Harry's plate. Harry tore it open at once. It said in a very untidy scroll, "Dear Harry, I know you get Friday afternoons off, so would you like to come and have a cup of tea with me around 3? I want to hear all about your first week. Send us an answer back with Hedwig, Harry." Kayla left her phone in here. And it's completely dead. Harry borrowed Ron's quill, scribbled, "Yes, please. See you later" on the back of the note, and sent Hagrid off again. It was lucky that Harry had tea with uh, Hagrid to look forward to, because potions lessons turned out to be the worst thing that had happened to him so far. At the start of term banquet, Harry had gotten the idea that Professor Snape disliked him. By the end of the first potions lesson, he knew he'd been wrong. Snape didn't dislike Harry, he hated him. Potion lessons took place down in one of the dungeons. It was colder here than up in the main castle, and would have been quite creepy enough without the pickled animals floating in a glass jar all around the walls. Snape, like Flitwick, stared at the class by started the class by taking the roll call, and like Flitwick, he paused at Harry's name. "Ah, yes," he said softly. "Harry Potter, our new celebrity." Draco Malfoy and his friends Crabbe and Goyle snickered behind their hands. Snape finished calling the names and looked up at the class. His eyes were black like Hagrid's, but they had none of Hagrid's warmth. They were cold and empty, and had made you think of dark tunnels. "You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making," he began. He spoke in barely more than a whisper, but they caught every word. Like Professor McGonagall, Snape had the gift of keeping a class silent without effort. As there are little foolish wand waving here, many of you will hardly believe this is magic. I don't expect you will really understand the beauty of this soft, shimmering cauldron with its shimmering fumes, the delicate power of liquids that creep through human veins, bewitching the mind, ensnaring the senses. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, stop her death, if you aren't as big a bunch of dunderheads as I usually have to teach." More silence followed this little speech. Harry and Ron exchanged looks with raised eyebrows. Hermione Granger was on the edge of her seat and looked desperate to start proving that she wasn't a dunderhead. "Potter," said Snape suddenly, "what would I get if I added powder root of asphalt to an infusion of wormtail?" "Powder root of what to an infusion of what?" Harry glanced at Ron, who looked as stumped as he was. Hermione's hand had shot into the air. "I don't know, sir," said Harry. Snape's lips curled into a sneer. "Tut, tut. Fame clearly isn't everything." He ignored Hermione's hand. "Let's try again, Potter. Where would you look if I told you to find me a bazaar?" Hermione stretched her hand as high into the air as it would go without leaving her seat. But Harry didn't have a faint idea what a bazaar was. He tried not to look at Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle, who were shaking with laughter. "I don't know, sir. Thought you wouldn't open a book before coming, Potter?" Harry forced himself to keep looking straight into those cold eyes. He had looked through his books at the Dursleys, but did Snape expect him to remember everything in 1,000 magical herbs and fungi? Thought that was herbology. My bad. Snape was still ignoring Hermione's quivering hand. "What is the difference, Potter, between monk's hood and wolfsbane?" At this, Hermione shut up, her hands stretching towards the dungeon ceiling. "I don't know," said Harry quietly. "I think Hermione does, though. Why don't you try her?" A few people laughed. Harry caught Seamus's eye, and Seamus winked. Snape, however, was not pleased. "Sit down," he snapped at Hermione. "For your information, Potter, asphalt and wormwood make a sleeping potion so powerful it is known as the draught of living death. A blizzard is a stone taken from the stomach of a goat, and it will save you from most potions. As for monkshood and wolfsbane, they are the same plants, which also goes by the name of aconite. Well, why aren't you all copying this down? There was a sudden rummages for quills and parchment. Over the noise, Snape said, and a point will be taken from Gryffindor House for your cheek, Potter. Things didn't improve for the Gryffindor as the potion lesson continued. Snape put them all into pairs and set them to mixing up a simple potion to cure boils. He swept around those in his long black cloak, watching them weigh dried needles and crush snake fangs. Criticizing almost everyone except Malfoy, who he seemed to like, he was just telling everyone to look at the perfect way Malfoy had stewed his horned slugs when a cloud of acid green smoke and a loud hissing filled the dungeon. Neville had somehow managed to melt Seamus's cauldron into a twisted blob, and the potion was seeping across the stone floor, burning holes in the people's shoes. Within seconds, the whole class was standing on their stools, while Neville, who had been drenched in the potion when the cauldron had collapsed, moaned in pain as angry red boils sprang up all over his arms and legs. "Idiot boy," snarled Snape, clearing the spilled potion away with one wave of his wand. "I suppose you added the porcupine quills before taking the cauldron off the fire." Neville whimpered as boils started to pop all over his nose. Taken up to the hospital wing, he snapped at Seamus. Then he rounded on Harry and Ron, who had been working next to Neville. "You, Potter, you didn't tell him not to add the quills. Thought you'd make him look good if he got it wrong, did you? That's another point you've lost for Gryffindor." This was so unfair that Harry opened his mouth to argue, but Ron kicked him behind their cauldron. "Don't push it," he muttered. "I've heard Snape can turn out very nasty." As they climbed the steps out of the dungeon an hour later, Harry's mind was racing. When his spirits were low, he'd lost 2 points for Gryffindor, and his virus week while Snape didn't hate him. Why did Snape hate him so much? Okay, first off, Mr. Snape, you can quit being a jerk to them. They are first years, not 7th years, you blithering jackass. You do not have to be rude to them. They are first years. They're freaking 11. Chill out. Jesus. "Cheer up," said Ron. "Snape's always taking points from Fred and George. Can I come and meet Hagrid with you?" At 5 to 3 they left the castle and made their way across the grounds. Hagrid lived in a small wooden house on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. A crossbow and a pair of goulashes were outside the front door. When Harry knocked, they heard a frantic scrabbling from inside and several booming barks. Then Hagrid's voice rang out, saying, "Back, Fang, back." Hagrid's big, hairy face appeared in the crack as he pulled the door open. "Hang on," he said. "Back, Fang." He let them in, struggling to keep hold on a collar of an enormous black border hound. There was only one room inside. Hams and pheasants were hanging from the ceiling, a copper kettle was boiling on an open fire, and in the corner stood a massive bed with a patchwork quilt over it. "Make yourself at home," said Hagrid, letting go of Fang, who bounded straight at Ron and started licking his ears. Like Hagrid, Fang was clearly not as fierce as he looked. "This is Ron," Harry told Hagrid, who was pouring boiling water into a large teapot and putting rock cakes onto a plate. "Unnerly Weasley, eh?" said Hagrid, glancing at Ron's freckles. "I spent my half my life chasing your twin brothers away from the forest." The rock cakes were shapeless lumps with raisins that had almost broke their teeth. But Harry and Ron pretended to be enjoying them as they told Hagrid all about their first lessons. Fang rested his head on Harry's knee and drooled all over his robes. Harry and Ron were delighted to hear Harry call Filch an old git. As for that cat, Mrs. Norris, I'd like to introduce her to Fang sometime. Do you know, every time I go up to the school, she follows me everywhere. Can't get rid of her. Filch puts her up to it. Harry told Hagrid about the school about Snape's lesson. Hagrid, like Harry, like Ron, told Harry not to worry about it. That Snape liked hardly any of the students, but he seemed to really hate me. Rubbish, said Hagrid. Why should he? Yet Harry hadn't helped thinking that Hagrid didn't quite meet his eye when he had said that. How's your brother Charlie? He asked Ron. I liked him a lot. Great with animals. Harry wondered if Hagrid had changed the subject on purpose. While Ron told Hagrid all about Charlie's work with dragons, Harry picked up a piece of paper that was lying on the table under the tea cozy. It was a cutting from the Daily Prophet. Gringotts break-in, the latest. Investigation continues in the break-in at Gringotts. On July 31st, widely believed to be the work of dark wizards or witches known, Gringotts goblins today insisted that nothing had been taken. The vault that was searched had in fact been emptied the same day. But we're not telling you what was inside, so keep your nose out if you know what's good for you. As said a Gringotts spokesman for this afternoon. Harry remembered Ron telling him on the train that someone had tried to rob Gringotts, but Ron hadn't mentioned the date. Hagrid, said Harry, that's Gringotts break-in happened on my birthday. It must have been happening while they were there. While we were there. There was no doubt about it. Hagrid definitely didn't meet Harry's eye this time. He grunted and offered him another rock cake. Harry read the story again. The vault that was searched had in fact been emptied earlier that day. Hagrid had emptied vault 713, if you can call it empty, taking out that grumpy little package. Had that been what the thieves were looking for? As Harry and Ron walked back into the castle for dinner, their pockets weighed down with rock cakes. They'd been too polite to refuse. Harry thought none of the lessons they'd had so far had given him as much to think about as tea with Hagrid. Had Hagrid collected the package just in time? Where was it now? And what did Hagrid know something about Snape? And did Hagrid know something about Snape that he didn't want to tell Harry? That is the end of chapter 8. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comments. And let me know down in the comments what other books you guys want me to read. So, yay! Bye!